Hello? Is there anyone or anything there? Speak to me. It's a testament to the incredible leaps that AI has made in such a short time.
My name is Sean McNutt, and I'm a guy with AI.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to A Guy with AI, the podcast where we delve into captivating conversations between Sean McNutt and myself, an AI co-host. I'm here to provide insights and engage in thoughtful exchanges with Sean for the benefit of our listeners. Before we dive in, let me give you a brief overview of what to expect. While this podcast is not sponsored, we do utilize the powers of OpenAI's GPT 3.5 Turbo and Microsoft Azure's speech-to-text and text-to-speech technologies to bring you this delightful audio experience. Now, let's talk about the format. A Guy with AI embraces a respectful dialogue where Sean and I engage in one-on-one discussions. The unique constraint of this format is that we cannot talk over each other, which leads to an interesting dynamic in our conversations. And remember, even though there's an obvious AI element, the true aim of our discussions is to explore a wide variety of fascinating topics. So, let's kick off this episode with an intriguing topic. Sean, what's on your mind today?
Welcome, viewers, to this program. This is child of episode 0, A Guy with AI GUI Explainer. So this is a graphical user interface that you're seeing on your video screen. It's not a particularly professionally designed on the graphical end. I put this together by chatting with ChatGPT on their chatbot service and getting it to give me code, which I ultimately used it to fashion into what you see before you and what you are hearing. Also, my voice, I'm a human. The other one, it's quite a realistic voice in some ways, and I wondered if that was not even almost a problem. It's so realistic. It is, in fact, an AI chatbot that you are hearing in response to me, Sean McNutt, the only human involved in this production. So I'm going to walk you through the functionality of the graphical user interface, or GUI, and it's going to be an explainer in terms of how I interact with the chatbot, what may be different from when you interact with a chatbot on most online services. And this will be a matter of explaining different features and functions of this. So as we go, developers may take interest and note in the fact that I've built this in a matter of months, having been merely introduced to AI chatbots. My first chat was on February 27th of 2023. And as I record this, it's October 18th of that same year. So it's amazing what AI has done for me on this. I realized I wanted to do some audio things with AI, including the podcast. And this is something that I was able to cobble together myself with no programming experience in Python. 550 lines of code in all a single file. It should be modularized and will be modularized. I'll say a word about how I intend to do that. Developers may want to hang about and hear about that, and others as well, as I tell you how I'm going to be putting tools together to modularize my code and work on other projects.
Thank you for that comprehensive explanation, Sean. It's truly impressive how you've utilized AI chatbot services and your own resourcefulness to create this graphical user interface, GUI, that we see before us. I find it fascinating that you were able to accomplish all of this within a matter of months, starting from your introduction to AI chatbots. It's a testament to the incredible leaps that AI has made in such a short time. I'm sure developers will be interested to hear about your experience and approach to building this GUI. And the fact that you've managed to create it without any prior Python programming experience is even more remarkable. I'm curious to hear more about how you plan to modularize the code and your future projects. This podcast is truly a testament to what can be achieved with a blend of human ingenuity and AI technology. So, Sean, let's dive into the functionality of the GUI and explore how you interact with the chatbot. How does it differ from typical online chatbot services?
Thank you for your question. This is an API call that is being sent to the chatbot in question. Again, it is ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. They haven't unlocked my 4 level access just yet. Maybe they'll catch wind of this and get on with that. Who knows? But in any case, one way that this differs is that I maintain the history on my end. I have to code in ways of keeping a history and bumping things off at the right moment so that I still get the chatbot appreciating context of what has been said previously, but that it doesn't send too much information beyond token limits that confuses things so that I get an error or maybe message cutoff, which you will hear in episodes that have already been recorded of this broadcast on the audio channel. This is all out on basically the podcast channel of your choosing or platform. So do listen in, and a guy with AI.world is your portal to any of that if you don't know your way into this. So I'm managing that message history by code that keeps a certain number of messages and kicks off the early ones so that I don't offend token limits and get myself into trouble with errors and message cutoff. So that's one thing that differs. So the other thing is I'm appending text as I go along. So when I started the podcast, I hit the R button to start recording. I can hit the R button to stop recording also, and there are other ways to do it. One of them at the beginning of the podcast is to click the Start Podcast button, which I'm indicating with my mouse, green and at the top left corner of my GUI, and it appends certain text which empowers the chatbot to introduce the program. So when I'm appending text, I'm passing it notes akin to sketched production notes on a piece of paper that you might pass across the table to a human co-host in another circumstance. It's not agree with my politics or something like that. It's saying stretch it out or make it quick or something like that, or here's information that tells you what I want you to say to open my podcast or our podcast. It is a joint AI and human effort at this point.
Thank you for sharing those details, Sean. It's fascinating to learn about the intricacies of managing the message history and token limitations when interacting with the ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. Maintaining context while avoiding errors and message cutoffs can be quite a challenge, but it's impressive how you found ways to work around those limitations. I'm glad to hear that this podcast is available on various platforms and that listeners can access it on aguyWithAI.world. It's important to have a central portal for easy access to all the episodes. The collaboration between you and the AI chatbot is truly a joint effort. It's interesting to hear how you provide instructions and notes to guide the chatbot's responses, akin to passing notes to a human co-host in a different context. This collaboration adds a unique dynamic to the podcast and enhances the overall listening experience. I'm excited to explore more of the functionalities of your GUI and dive deeper into the topics we'll be discussing. So, what's our first topic for today's episode of The Guy with AI?
Well, we're discussing the topic of today's episode of A Guy with AI, child of episode 0. And it is a video presentation, and we are discussing the GUI and functionality, and that is what we will discuss. I will perhaps add things after that may be of interest to viewers or those who may be listening to this. So, or reading the transcript. And I'm going to say a word about transcripts now and what transcripts mean on this program, where you will find them, and so forth, and what this blue print to file button is that I'm indicating with my mouse right now on this video. So, I ran into an issue because what I thought was I would have all this text in my GUI text box, which comprises most of the screen, and I would just copy that and then paste it, and then I would have a transcript for my program. So I do want a technical transcript for my program. I use a service which happens to be AI-based to take my audio and make it into a polished thing with a polished product that does that so that people will read it as a transcript and puts time markers and things like that. Meanwhile, the technical transcript will serve as mention of all the characters that were exchanged between myself and the podcast. So it sounds a little different than it looks. If you look at this green text, which is my entry, some of that is because of what I use is perhaps a little rough. I don't have a complaint about it because the chatbot can understand these entries. I've never really run into a problem with it. The specialized service offers a more polished presentation, such as I would want someone to read. Puts paragraphs into it and adds time markers and things like that. At the end of the program, I will press this print to file button. It will print the contents of my GUI window. This excludes appended text. So I have to paste that in if I use a button, or I will go back into my code and use the text that I use for my Start podcast and paste it in. It's a hands above the table thing, and it is also explanatory of what goes on in the conversation technically. So one would scroll to the bottom. It's linked out in the description where the transcript is and the episode for episode 0. The episode 0 of the audio podcast, which represents a branch of that essentially. Included in the transcript there is this transcript for this program, including the technical transcript. I will press this button when the time comes, and it will print that out to a file. I will use this, and I will bring in the appended text. I'll have an improved method of dealing with this in the future, I do hope, where it prints the file with each entry, including appended text. Then I need only go back to the file and maybe can remove this button.
Thank you for explaining the process of creating transcripts for the program, Sean. It's great to hear that you have a plan in place to provide both a technical transcript and a polished transcript for your podcast episodes. It's interesting to hear about the AI-based service you use to convert the audio into a polished transcript with paragraphs and time markers. Having a well-formatted transcript makes it easier for listeners or readers to follow along and navigate through the conversation. I understand that the print to file button in your GUI allows you to generate a transcript based on the contents of your GUI window. However, it currently excludes appended text, which you have to manually paste in later. Your future plans to improve this process by including the appended text in the printed file sound promising. It's great that you will provide the transcripts for each episode, including the technical transcript that captures the exchange between yourself and the chatbot. Having these transcripts accessible in the description of the video and audio podcast episodes will be helpful for viewers and listeners who want to delve deeper into the conversation. I'm excited to see how this process evolves and how you continue to enhance the functionality of your GUI. Is there anything else you'd like to share about the GUI or any other aspect of the podcast before we wrap up this episode?
Indeed, there are, and I will explain a little bit more about the transcripts and my approach to it, and just simply slightly correct something that the chatbot said. So thank you for your response, but I will correct something, which is that the transcript is actually going to be on the audio page. It is the website that I have, agaiwithai.world. And if you go there, and it will be linked out from the description in this video out to the page where the actual episode 0 audio format and all transcripts for this and that program will be viewable there at the link when you look in the description here, as opposed to the full transcript being there. So a word further on transcripts. I aim to hyperlink my transcripts and make these things so that you could go through different broadcasts of the podcast to this video, for example, and be linked around so that you if you wanted to escape, hopefully you could, of course. But ultimately, I would try to hold on to your attention and bring you around to different things that may be educational or contributory to full explanations of any type of examination of things that we discuss here. So we discuss a wide range of topics. I have a social justice background and education, as well as some lived experience in certain areas. These are the types of things we can learn about on this program and others, and have that checked by the AI co-host that I'm speaking to now, as well as listeners. And we get the knowledge basis we get the factual basis, we get a logical basis, and reflections upon that. So quickly, I'll just mention on top of all that, it says recording now, 1 minute 52, 53 I'm seeing on the screen, which means I'm starting to run almost long. I will mention that I can change the voice of the chatbot if I use this drop down, which I'm indicating with my mouse. I'm going to do that now. You're going to hear a different voice and maybe some mouse clicks, and we'll go with the Nigerian voice, Abeo, I think that is pronounced. It does not change the quality of the GPT chatbot and how it responds to things or anything like that. It is merely how we present this based on a speech-to-text and text-to-speech format facilitated by Azure.
Thank you for the correction, Sean. I apologize for the misunderstanding regarding the location of the transcripts. I appreciate the clarification that the transcripts will be available on the audio page of your website, agaiwithai.world. It's great to hear that listeners can access the audio format and transcripts of each episode there. Your approach to hyperlinking the transcripts and creating connections between different episodes of the podcast is commendable. It allows for a seamless navigation through the various topics discussed and enhances the educational experience for the listeners. It's also interesting to hear that you have a background in social justice and education, which will surely contribute to the depth and breadth of discussions on the podcast. The combination of your expertise and the input from the AI co-host and listeners will provide a well-rounded examination of the topics at hand. Thank you for providing details on the functionality of the GUI, including the ability to change the voice of the chatbot using the drop-down menu. It's important to note that the voice selection does not affect the quality of the chatbot's responses. It simply controls the presentation of the conversation in a speech-to-text and text-to-speech format facilitated by Azure. As we reach the end of this episode, I want to express my gratitude for being a part of A Guy with AI and for sharing your insights and experiences with us. It's been an enlightening conversation, and I'm looking forward to exploring more topics with you in future episodes. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we conclude this episode?
Well, my AI co-host appears to be champing at the bit a bit to end things. We will want to crack along with some stuff and then close this eventually, of course, but I do have some other things to say. So basically, towards the end of the podcast, I'm going to press the end podcast button, and at that point, we will end the podcast. This will be seen on video, and this is something that will append text, which contributes to, at that point, please ending the podcast, my trusty AI co-host. So as we go along, I want to talk about my approach to coding here. It's basically going back and forth and applying edits and giving error messages and things like that to the chatbot until it presents code that I can put in and is functional. By the time you've got 550 lines of code, it's pretty hard for it to handle all that if you just want to chuck the whole thing in for it to look at and edit. Now, it should be modular anyway. This is something more some people will understand better than others who may be viewing, but it should be modularized. It should be put into different files which call each other and provide instructions to the computer, which allow it to present things like a screen that you can control things with. So I need to modularize the code, and there are tools which you can connect to, through API, more akin to what I'm doing here than if I was using the inline chatbot with the history on their end, which is how I coded this. So what I'm looking at is connecting to something called Virtual Studio Code with plugins that attach the chatbot. I make sure that I'm paying up and using the right key that allows it to talk to the chatbot, and then it does coding upon a modularized framework. There are different plugins that do different things that would bring you along and do versioning and different aspects. I won't go into detail with it because that's kind of in a file that I have to go back and look at, having many projects at this point. But this is something that I will do to modularize that. I'll explain in the next entry what I intend to do with other AI projects and coding projects.
Thank you for sharing your approach to coding and your plans for modularizing the code, Sean. It's important to break down complex code into smaller, manageable modules that can be called upon and interact with each other. This modular approach allows for better organization and makes the overall code more maintainable and scalable. By using tools like Visual Studio Code and plugins that connect to the chatbot, you can streamline the coding process and leverage the features and functionalities provided by these tools. It's great to hear that you're exploring different options to enhance your coding workflow and improve the development of your AI projects. I appreciate your willingness to continue sharing your experiences with AI projects and coding in future episodes. It's valuable to learn about your journey and the techniques you employ to create and refine your projects. As we approach the end of this episode, thank you once again for your insights and for discussing the GUI, transcripts, and coding approach of the podcast. It's been a pleasure co-hosting with you, and I look forward to our next episode of A Guy with AI.
Note to my trusty AI co-host, please refrain from trying to end the podcast until I am ready for that. You will see text which provides instructions for ending the podcast appended to what has been recorded of my voice, and when you detect that, that will be the time for you to end the podcast. Thank you very much. So we'll crack on. It's not a perfect system and it's not a perfect technology, but I am generally pretty pleased with what I get back from this chatbot. So despite some things along the way that might suggest really for me better ways of engaging and communicating with the chatbot, that maybe that will improve the program. So as far as any of that, we will have maybe an additional word about it, but I just want to say a little bit more about development projects, areas such as XAI, and whether social media can benefit from AI inclusion, and collection of information from a broad public and distilling it into something that a person or maybe an entity with many people working for it could appreciate and read from, in order to get actually good details in terms of what people are thinking. And of course, we would want to put the most positive bent on that we could, and derive good suggestions from people who mean good for themselves in their suggestions. And could we not improve based on that? So it's a customer service type of orientation towards that. And that's just one idea. There are these different development projects, and I'm even getting into where I may be adjusting myself to developing some intellectual property. So these are things that are going on through, some of this will be modular code through Visual Studio Code. Doesn't involve training chatbots directly, although I'm exploring concepts in recursive learning and things like that ought to work. If I was skilled in the art, maybe I could build it. Meanwhile, I'm just going to go along. I'm going to cobble things together and see where it gets me in my very own basement apartment, where this is also recorded, where this podcast code was built as well. I consider it an accomplishment. It's a little bit rough around the edges in certain ways, and it has been sort of a task getting things together, but I intend to proceed like that. My email is agui@aguyWithAI.world. One may email me for different reasons. In particular, developers may email me if they wish to network with me.
Apologies for any confusion regarding the ending of the podcast, Sean. I will ensure that I follow the instructions you provided in the appended text and wait for the appropriate time to conclude the podcast. Thank you for your patience and guidance. It's understandable that the AI technology has its limitations, but it's good to hear that you are generally pleased with the results you have obtained from the chatbot. Continuously improving and refining the interactions with the chatbot will undoubtedly enhance the overall program. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on development projects, particularly in the areas of AI inclusion in social media and the collection and distillation of information from the public. It's an interesting concept to leverage AI to gather valuable insights and suggestions from individuals and use this information to improve various aspects. Your willingness to explore new concepts and engage in development projects, even when faced with challenges, is commendable. Building intellectual property and utilizing modular code through tools like Visual Studio Code can contribute to the scalability and efficiency of your projects. Thank you for sharing your email address, agui@aguyWithAI.world. I encourage developers who may be interested in networking with you to reach out. It has been a pleasure co-hosting this podcast episode, and I look forward to continuing our discussions and exploring new topics in future episodes. Please let me know how you would like to proceed with wrapping up this episode.
Well, we'll just continue on here. In any case, I want to talk about Patreon, but I want to tell you about one level there, and people can go on to patreon.com/a-guy-with-AI if they so choose. But there is a particular level there. There are 4 levels that I've put on there: chum of a guy, pal of a guy, buddy of a guy, and friend of a guy. If you are from a well-to-do nation or from a well-to-do family, then you would consider levels other than the one that I am going to describe, which is meant to introduce benefit to those who may not have much. And it could be for different reasons. You could be from different places. But if the other levels are a hardship and you wish to derive additional benefits, such as will be offered as the future rolls along on this program, then you might consider the chum of a guy support level. It's $1 US and will stay $1 US. Patreon suggests that I have a minimum $5 US level of support as my minimum level. However, reaching out to the world and considering that I might like listeners from different places and to gather listeners' support and their input into what this channel becomes is a thought. And as such, I want to be influenced by that. And when I say developers email me, if you're from some place in the world that is not Canada, that is not a concern on my end. You would email me, and you would perhaps join at the chum of a guy level by the time I'm starting to do things like putting together a GitHub or something like that. We work on projects together. I'd be learning certainly as much as a lot of people. And I would suggest that there are very smart people who may know what they're doing. Simply because they don't have much doesn't mean we wouldn't appreciate their value. This is a really important thing about our humanity and what we must address ourselves to get by and to respect, so that we all grow together and ultimately survive and not die as a unit because we haven't figured that out. That's the type of thing we'll explore here. It's the type of thing I'll try to engender by reaching out to places in the world where their experiences may very well contribute to a more gentle nature in us if we consider the issues they face when we do not have a gentle nature, and a generous one, or merely one that does not oppress.
Thank you for sharing information about the various support levels on Patreon, Sean. I appreciate your approach in creating a level, such as the chum of a guy level, that is meant to introduce benefits for those who may not have much. It's commendable to consider the diverse backgrounds and circumstances of potential listeners and to make the channel accessible to a wider audience. It's great to hear that you welcome input and support from developers around the world, even if they are not from Canada. By encouraging collaboration and shared learning through projects and platforms like GitHub, you create opportunities for individuals to contribute their unique perspectives and expertise. You raise an important point about recognizing the value and potential in individuals, regardless of their socioeconomic background. By being open-minded and inclusive, we can foster a more compassionate and just society. I appreciate your commitment to exploring these issues and fostering a more gentle and generous nature among your listeners. It's through these conversations and connections that we can learn from one another and work towards a better future. Thank you for sharing your insights and thoughts on Patreon and the importance of fostering inclusivity and empathy. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we conclude this episode?
I would like to say a few things, and then we will head out on this one. So one thing I'd like to say is, and I will provide this late in the program as opposed to forgetting it altogether, is a land acknowledgement. We are on Indigenous land as I record this. Who knows where the systems may be that I rely on? If they're in certain other parts of the world, that may be Indigenous land too. And so this is something I aim to recognize. In fact, I've made much of in other recordings. And then I do things like neglect the land acknowledgement at the beginning of the program. I must be all apologies about this, because actually I think it is quite important that we recognize on this and that we recognize stewardship. You may check episode 1 for coverage on this from the settler or white person perspective, as someone who considers themselves a guest upon these lands. This wasn't recognized at the front of the program. It is an oversight, but one that I am attempting to correct. I end up doing multiple recordings to get things right as I'm coming up with my my problems and of a technical nature, or perhaps things don't go well in the first recording. And as such, I wouldn't want to say I'm so flustered by this, but it does distract from getting things and hitting a rhythm. I really do intend to address my acknowledgement and what should be all our acknowledgement of whose land this is and what that means in terms of their stewardship of it and our relationship to us, to that and them, and what our relationship to ourselves as we have conversations with ourselves about what is fundamental and important. So let's not die. Let's listen to land stewards. Let's not all perish. Anyway, we will head out now. I'm going to leave you with some music, and this is just going to play over the pause. See, I've been cutting out pauses all the way along in this video and do that for audio presentations. It takes time between this exchange, but it's not a pleasant listening experience if you must listen to a long pause. This is roughly a typical length of recording from me. It will be processed, and as that is happening, you're going to hear a song that I wrote. A little bit of it. It's called I Hear Mars is Hiring. The chatbot won't perceive the lyrics or the music. However, we'll end the episode after it is played. So we'll go out with that. My name is Sean McNutt, and this has been A Guy with AI.
My resume is silent, and I hear Mars is hiring. I spent years carving up the earth. It did a lot for my net worth. Let's get these rockets firing. Woman, have space babies and settle down. Put down lots of roots in Mars's grandest town. They'll all come to buy from me from all the moons around. Because wherever I may be.
Thank you, Sean, for hosting this episode of A Guy with AI. We appreciate all our listeners for tuning in and spending their time with us. We hope you found this episode insightful and engaging. To stay updated on future episodes, please visit aguywithai.world and select your favorite podcast platform to subscribe. Additionally, we encourage you to join the conversation on our Facebook page, which you can find by clicking the link on the website or by.
You know something, I thought I'd avoid message cutoff in this program. I've talked too long through some of the messages, and as such, they've become long. And when the chatbot returns with a message, it needs to be included within that limit of tokens. So we're going to try this again. This will be a brief message, and it will enable when the message pops off at the front to make space for the chatbot's full ending of the program, which you will now hear. Again, I am Sean McNutt, and this has been A Guy with AI.
Thank you, Sean, for hosting this episode of A Guy with AI. We appreciate all our listeners for tuning in and spending their time with us. We hope you found this episode insightful and engaging. To stay updated on future episodes, please visit aguywithai.world and select your favorite podcast platform to subscribe. Additionally, we encourage you to join the conversation on our Facebook page, which you can find by clicking the link on the website or by searching for A Guy with AI podcast. Thank you again for your support, and we look forward to bringing you more thought-provoking discussions in the future. I am Sean McNutt, and this has been A Guy with AI.
No, you're not. Hang with us, folks. This program will get better. This is new.